Hey, welcome to chapter 4, titled The Planets of On the Heavenly Spheres. Um, Chapter 4 is on page 25. And I'm trying a new reading setup, so I'm not looking down the entire time. Okay, chapter 4, The Planets. The planets are the foundation of astrology because it is through their motion, expression, and interaction that it is possible to make astrological interpretations. To the terrestrial observer, the planets first appear as luminous points similar to stars. However, the planets change positions over time, while the stars always maintain their relative positions. In fact, the word planet comes from the Greek word. It's actually written in Greek in I don't know how to pronounce that. Um yeah. Not even gonna try. Which means errant or wanderer. Because of their erratic movement relative to the immutable stars, the celestial sphere, the planets stand for what is mutable in the sky. They are therefore the principal instruments for measuring and qualifying those celestial changes, as well as their counterparts in the mundane world. Planetary symbols. In astrology, each planet is represented by a symbol or a glyph. These symbols represent some of the attributes of the planet or the deity associated with it. The origin of the current symbols is Greco-Roman, and although they have undergone changes over time, their basic symbolism has survived. We have the moon, which is perhaps the most recognizable and simple of all the glyphs. It is a lunar crescent. The sun is represented by a circle with a point at the center, symbolizing origin and the creative force. Mars, interesting to jump to Mars. Mars is represented by a circle from which an arrow emerges. Although it changed over time, the arrow has been a constant feature. Venus is represented by a circle atop a cross. Some authors say it depicts the mirror of Venus. The symbol for Mercury is similar to that of Venus, except for it has the crescent at the top. It is inspired by the caduceus, a staff with two intertwined serpents of the Greek god Hermes, whom the Romans call Mercury. The glyph for Jupiter, which looks like the number 4, is in reality a variation of the letter Z for Zeus, the Greek name of this deity. I didn't know that. Cool. The symbol for Saturn is composed of a semicircle capped with a cross and may possibly represent a scythe. Scythe? What death uses to reap. Symbol of the deity associated with the planet. Planetary hierarchy. In order to understand the nature and function of each planet, it is necessary to study its position in the celestial scheme, introduced in chapter 2. The first thing to keep in mind is that the order in which the planets are distributed, this is known as the Chaldean order, and it distributes the planets from the most distant sphere to the nearest in order of apparent motion. Thus, the slowest planet, Saturn, starts this sequence, followed by Jupiter, Mars, the Sun, Venus, Mercury, and then the Moon. The luminaries and the planets. First, we need to distinguish between luminaries and planets. The luminaries, or lights, are the Sun and the Moon. Due to their luminosity, they are considered the king and the queen of the heavens. The sun-moon pair make up the basic model structured in terms of polarities for the classification of the planets, masculine and feminine, diurnal, nocturnal, onopheric, catapheric, which are not those words aren't in here, but when I learned onopheric, I'm not even gonna try. Um, the sun is the most important star. According to the Chaldean order, it is located in the center of the sequence of the planetary spheres and is considered the symbolic center of the heavens. The moon and his consort, the queen of the heavens. The moon is his consort, the sun's consort, as queen of the heavens. The remaining planets constitute the royal retinue, the court of the luminaries. This distinction of the two luminaries from the five planets is fundamental in the astrological system. Superior and inferior planets. The sun, as the center of the planetary sequence, also influenced the manner in which the planets are grouped. Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, which are above the solar sphere and therefore have a motion slower than the star king, are called the superior planets. Since they move more slowly, they offset their, their effects are considered more enduring and prolonged, particularly those of Jupiter and Saturn. Those situated in the sphere below that of the sun, which is Venus, Mercury, and the moon, are called the inferior planets. As these planets move more quickly, their effects are more transitory, but their action is more dynamic. It should be noted that the inferior and superior classifications has nothing to do with good or bad qualities, but rather with their positioning below inferior or above superior the solar celestial sphere. The modern planets Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. The trans-Saturnian or modern planets are not visible to the naked eye, so they do not belong in the scheme of traditional astrology. Since the objective of this book is to provide the student with the foundations of traditional astrology, the three main modern planets will not be included in the central body of this work. The integration of these three planets in the astrological system is covered in Appendix 2, the modern planets. The nature of the planets. The nature of each planet derives from various astronomical characteristics determined by direct observation. These are movement, appearance, luminosity, and most important, the position in their celestial scheme. The temperaments. Hey, we're back to that. In astrological theory, each planet is characterized by two primary qualities that synthesize its essential nature and that are attributed to it according to the position of the celestial spheres. The sun, due to its heat and radiance, has a hot and dry nature. Nevertheless, its action is considered moderate because without its heat and light, life would not be possible. Its luminosity varies depending upon the season, which also contributes to its moderation. However, when a planet is too close to the sun, the star king loses its temperate nature and becomes exceedingly hot and dry. Then it is said that this planet is combust. The moon is characterized principally by its moist quality due to its association with the oscillating motion of liquids. Second, it has coldness as a quality because it complements the sun, which is hot. However, since the amount of light reflected by the moon is oscillating, it is said that she becomes relatively hotter when she is waxing and therefore more luminous, and relatively colder when she is waning in the waning phase, thus darker. Saturn, the most distant visible planet, has an excessively cold and dry quality. Mars, on the other hand, is excessively hot and dry quality due to its proximity to the sphere of the sun. Jupiter, lying in between these two extremes, the coldness of Saturn and the heat of Mars, has a temperate and fertile nature. it is moderately hot and moist. Venus has the same temperament as Jupiter, temperate. Has the same temperate nature as Jupiter. It is hot because it is close to the sun, sphere, and moist because it's situated in the inferior celestial spheres, thus closer to the moon. Some authors nevertheless attribute a cold quality to it because it's a feminine planet. In any event, it is a moist quality that is important as to its temperature, hot or cold. The most relevant aspect is its moderation. Mercury has an ambiguous nature. It may be dry because it's never too far from the sun, but it's also moist because it's near the lunar sphere. Thus, the qualities of this planet tend to change according to the circumstances in which it finds itself. Nevertheless, notwithstanding this, some authors say that Mercury's own nature, that is, when it is alone and does not interact with planets, tends to be dry. Three other important concepts that describe the nature of the planets are derived from classifying the planets through their qualities. The existence of the malefics and benefics, masculine and feminine planets, and diurnal and nocturnal planets. So, malefic and benefic planets. The term malefic and benefic may be the most misunderstood in modern astrology. The confusion arises by equating in a simplistic and judgmental manner that the term benefic with good and the term malefic with bad. Due to the current insistence on what is politically correct and to the lack of astrological knowledge, these terms are frowned upon in current astrological vocabulary. First, it is important to recall the origin of astrological symbolism that comes from an essentially agricultural context, not from a judgment about individual morality. Thus, the terms malefic and benefic are essentially functional. If a planet brings benefits and has an expression that is naturally constructive, it is considered a benefic. If a planet represents effort, deprivation, and restriction and has a naturally destructive expression, it is considered malefic. With regard to the nature of the planets, the term benefic and malefic arise in connection with primary qualities. Hot and moist are favorable to life and growth, as they produce fertile environments. The contrary qualities, cold and dry, are antagonistic to life and they produce wild and sterile environments. To understand the symbolism, one only need observe the growth of plants, which develop better in warm, humid environments. Thus, Jupiter and Venus, which have the qualities of hot and moist and moderate qualities, are considered benefic planets, favorable to life, growth, and prosperity. Saturn is excessively cold and dry, while Mars is excessively hot and dry. Because of this, they are considered contrary to life, representing the principles of destruction and decline, which is why they are considered malefics. In agricultural terms, Saturn symbolizes frost. I hadn't read that line before. Which gives rise to cold burns. And Mars is the searing heat that weakens the plants, like the drought that kills them. In the human body, the cold of Saturn represents, for example, a state of hypothermia, with excessive heat of the Mars may be associated with feverish states. Since Saturn is the slowest moving planet, its effects are more prolonged, so it is known as the Great or Greater Malefic. Mars is faster, so the effects are not as long lasting, therefore, it is called the Minor or Lesser Malefic. Of the benefics, Jupiter moves more slowly and is called the Greater or Greater Benefic. It literally says greater or greater twice. While Venus, moving more quickly, is known as the Minor or Lesser Benefic. The sun is generally considered a benefic because it is the giver of life and light. Nevertheless, if it is too close to another planet, it is considered malefic since its heat burns and light blinds. The moon and Mercury, due to their variable natures, alternate between benefic and malefic. As usual, the classification of Mercury depends on a combination, it's in combination with other planets. When it is located near the benefics, it assumes their benefic traits, and when near the malefics, it assumes a malefic expression. The moon tends to be benefic when it is waxing, since it carries more light and heat, and relatively more malefic when it is waning and loses its light and heat. There are still a few important points to consider with regard to this classification. First, it is important to emphasize that benefic and malefic role of a planet depends greatly upon the context of its interpretation. If the destruction of something is beneficial, the destruction of disease, for example, then a malefic planet becomes favorable. In addition, we also recall that in this chapter we're only discussing basic nature of the planets. This may be altered by various circumstances, namely their positions by sign and houses, whether a malefic planet may have a benefic effect or vice versa. Lastly, we need to consider that all excesses are destructive and therefore malefic. For example, although heat and humidity are generally beneficial to life, their excess favors the growth of fungus, promoting rotting, and thus, under certain circumstances, they may be considered malefic. Again, it all depends upon the context. Yeah, we'll call it there. We'll move into the next part on the next video. Okay, thanks.